Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Be Ready for Anything podcast from ToolsGroup. I'm your host, Katie Van Adsen, and today I'll be talking with Birger Klinke, ToolsGroup's pre-sales manager for Europe. Thanks for joining me, Birger. How's it going?
Hi, nice to meet you again, Katie. I'm happy today having an interview with you, and let's see where we go.
Thanks, yeah. So, as we all know, 2020 was anything but normal, and its effects on retail supply chains will linger into this year as well. What do you predict will be different for retailers in 2021?
Yes, I fully agree with you that we had a sort of disaster probably for a lot of company in 2020. But on the other hand, I think also for a lot of company still, and especially in retail, it was a changing year. Also, how they enter the market and how they see the market. Especially, I would say when we were talking about the Amazon effect, I would say now it's present more than ever. Maybe even changing the word into the COVID effect. And digitalization is more than present. The brick and mortar business, especially from the German perspective, decreased. 80% of the inner city companies, especially retail companies, are at risk with the existence there. And therefore, I definitely see there huge potential for, on the other side, for companies who saw the early stage of investing into retail, and especially on online retail sector. So when you see that, basically companies really didn't prepare for that on the point of sale side. When you see that perspective, on the other hand, on the supply side, in 2014, I remember that DHL was talking about resilience, where everyone was wondering what that really meant and how to set up the risk management globally. And I think now every company would be happy to have something like that. When we dig a little bit deeper into the point of sale side, I think that companies who invested in digitalization were really good and really prepared, especially in German market. To refer to that and give you some numbers, was that last year we saw an increase of overall 30% in the online sector. So before, everyone was still speculating if online will be present, if this will be the new channel where customers will go to. And especially, I would say, in the supermarket business, so the food retail business and construction material business, we had a huge increase. On the other hand, of course, as the consumer was not so focused on other industries, we had a slightly decrease also there. So therefore, I think that companies who were prepared had, let's say, a multi-channel strategy already present, didn't struggle that much. And as I said in the introduction, that it was probably not a disaster year, but other companies who were not really prepared, let's say fashion industry, who just sell from stores, couldn't get rid of probably their stock at all. And other companies who were, let's say, over the years preparing already a complete online strategy and only set up for that, as for example Zalando or HelloFresh. When you look at the fashion industry, also on the food retail industry, they when you look, for example, at their shares, that the shares raised up by 100%, for example, in Zalando, 200% with HelloFresh. So this is really a big number, and these companies are, I would say, prepared now, and they probably smile at the companies who were only before present in the store business, and nobody really believed in that. And maybe let me say a few words on especially on the supply side. So that before was more towards the point of sale side. How then companies prepared for the supply side. So here I think it was the discussion also to COVID, as you said, and probably on this year, how companies react to that. I spoke about the DHA resilience or risk management. So a lot of researchers predicted, or economists predicted, that it will go to a, let's say, deglobalization or to a renationalization. I wouldn't say that really companies now step back from, let's say, their global supply chain. I think it's more that the idea of sourcing and how to buffer certain inventory will be definitely more localized. You see that especially that the expected warehouse space is increasing rapidly. So it doubled up last year. So also the demand for it, and even the demand couldn't be really supplied with inventory space. So this is definitely something from the supply side, what is a takeaway. And also the investments who were taken from bigger companies in the Asian market. I don't think that they will step back from this big investment. And also, for example, when you look at China, China is in 5 years, I think, the biggest economy in the world. And I think companies will be happy to be present on that market with production. So not only bringing that to Europe, but keeping it there and also be present on that market and don't want to miss the chance. And at the end, maybe towards to supply chain, looking at the transportation, I think companies were also creative, especially after the COVID release a little bit, let's say the limitations. There was a big peak. All the shipping companies were completely, let's say, sold out. So companies look for alternative ways. So there's also, let's say, a rail track that, from China to Germany, which was increasing by 25%, and not just using that as an alternative. Even when you look at the numbers, it's 95% more sustainable, and it's halfway cheaper than using like air freight logistics. And therefore, I think for this year, I'm pretty curious how companies will react on all these trends and deal with that, and what of, let's say, the speculation really comes through. But I think it was definitely an interesting year, and it gave, like, let's say, the digitalization a big peak, and also in terms of supply, new ideas, and probably also to be more regional again than to just think in global sourcing.
Yeah, and with all this change that you've discussed and all this unpredictability, how can probabilistic forecasting help retailers explore a broader range of hypothetical scenarios?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely a good question how companies also can be better prepared now, and what are, let's say, movements and decisions from the management to invest in. I think definitely with a general approach, so let's say the generic forecasting approach of companies, and also with their planners, exceeded slightly with all these impacting factors that we just discussed, or that I just named before. So I think especially with a probabilistic model that we are also offering with our application, a frequency-based model. What means is so that we look at the quantity and at the order lines. That definitely together gives you the chance to have a better picture on how the sellout side, so especially the consumer side, looks like, and how to react on that. And we support the user with, let's say, the combination out of that to give him the best probabilistic model that you can find on the market. And in addition, of course, the user always at the end has to take the decision. But relying on a model and having the possibility to define scenarios, because we don't know what will happen now in February, how the restrictions, for example, will be with COVID, how it looks like in mid of the year, end of the year, and let's say next year, depending on industry. But especially in retail, where I would say we have shorter lead times, it definitely makes sense to work with a probabilistic model to see how basically the consumer behaves, how he basically consumes. This definitely gives, with a probabilistic model, you the possibility to decide with different scenarios where to invest and which decision to make. and supports the planner in his day-to-day routine planning, for example, with SO99.
And as some retailers, particularly those in e-commerce, are experiencing crushing demand as a side effect of the pandemic, how can an automated planning system help them keep up?
Yeah, I think especially in the e-commerce sector, what I mentioned before, they encountered a huge peak due to the available channel. It's basically available at any time, everywhere, and also companies like Uber Eats, Deliveroo, etc. supporting, let's say, the last mile. So makes it basically still available to enter to a marketplace where you basically have the possibility to see all assortment and order from there. And this, of course, is the reason why we had the big peak in e-commerce. But these companies are, especially in the beginning, when we talk about startups who now encountered a bigger peak, also more regional companies in food retail, which popped up in the market, that they were focusing on sales and marketing and not so much on supply chain. So therefore, I think especially in supply chain, they are lagging, let's say, knowledge how to ramp up there and how to build a network that is, let's say, resilience, what we talked before, and can basically answer to the big demand that is coming. And therefore, it's always good to offer them a sort of automated planning, as our application SO99 is doing, to basically give you the chance in a easy manner to provide you what we discussed before about a probabilistic model, first of all for the forecast, but then also an end-to-end solution over the fulfillment and replenishment part, to basically go hand in hand, so that we take out from the forecasting part to be more reliable, to answer on certain trends. And especially in the e-commerce, I think it's really important to be reactive. So, and especially in the forecasting part, I think it's good to see certain patterns in the short term and to react on them, and also be with a certain service level that you would like to achieve, able to answer that. And I think for that, it's definitely necessary to have a supply chain solution. And lately, I just maybe can refer to a discussion with a prospect also from e-commerce, that the representative there from the supply chain department told me that they exceeded basically the functionality of Excel and said, of course, this is nothing where we can handle these peaks with. And we have to look for, let's say, really a supply chain planning solution, not working with mass data in a Excel spreadsheet, and spend a lot of time on data tweaking. This can be all done with solution out of the shelf, which we are offering, and to provide basically with that a good entrance for small and mid-sized companies, but as well for big companies. And for this, I think there are different options that we can offer to them. That, for example, if the knowledge is not given, that we can support also with resources and, let's say, a sort of outsourcing principle that we have, or let's say a more light approach to really start with a just recently released cooperation with Microsoft, our light platform from SO99, and many other options. So I think definitely in e-commerce, it's a must-have also, besides being strong, let's say, on the point of sale side, to also have a strong supply chain behind and make it more and more resilient.
And as retailers are going about this, do you have any tips for how they can reduce noise in their demand forecasting?
Yes. So I think coming from also from what I said before in the e-commerce sector, that we I think lately experienced a big peak due to COVID, and the readiness wasn't really given in the supply chain part. So to basically have an overview of your demand and start and ramp up, I think it's mostly important to establish a solution, a supply chain planning solution. And how we do that is basically we talk about demand segmentation when we talk about reducing noise. So what demand segmentation means, that we look at the demand and first of all, and we're trying slowly to ramp up the confidence of a planner to trust the system. And therefore we start more in a semi-automated way. Still, our vision is to go more and more automated when we talk about the routine tasks. But starting with our trainings when we implement our solution and give guidance to our customers, that the focus here is to be, first of all, always in focus that the user can trust the system when it overtakes certain daily routine tasks. And this we do, how we do that, I talked about demand segmentation. So when we talk about demand segmentation, it can be a big peak due to a promotion or a certain event in a location. So our system automatically detects when the user enters our solution. We have a dashboard which basically has an overview of all tasks that he has to do and gives you guidance. And in these tasks, for example, in the demand part, we separate the demand into demand peaks, for example, or demand troughs, so the opposite. And by identifying this, we guide the user basically and request him to qualify these outliers and basically give our solution in a self-learning manner the possibility to learn with the user how to react on these outliers. So that in the next step, in a fully automated manner, the system automatically can detect these outliers. For example, when we talk about the demand peak, or basically lost sales due to out of stock situation, for example, but there was a certain demand. We basically correct this demand with we call so-called dummy demand, and correct basically we're talking about demand cleansing here. The demand in the past, so that the forecast in the future basically smoothened and basically represents also the real demand from the point of sale side.
So my final question for you today is, how can AI enhanced forecasting help retailers factor seasonality into their forecasts?
Yeah, I think this is also a really good point. We talked about, I would say, more probabilistic forecasting before, and let's say more the baseline forecasting. On top of that, we are offering, and I think a lot of companies doing that, and also from the market, it's already always requested, talking about AI and machine learning, what this really means. And I think it means a lot when we look at the forecast accuracy, when we see, we would answer the question like this, but how to implement and use that. I think also now, when we look back to also last year and also to the evolvement of digitalization, that more and more users of digital devices use, for example, self-scanning, order online. So more and more information are really present. You see that how to deal with this data. First of all, you need to store that. So in 2020 and in 2021, we see that the budget of companies are between 25 and 30% of the total budget, IT budget, that they release. So first of all, we see that there's a lot of data available. So what we do with the data, we designed standardized processes, as you mentioned, for example, for treating, for example, seasonality patterns out of additional data facts. And what means these additional data facts? We're not just talking about the master information. We're not just talking about typical market information or, let's say, material information. Here we talk about additional attributes who really, let's say, define the characteristic of a market or of a product, and basically mix them, connect them. And this brings us basically to the point that we can use this information besides, let's say, also external factors, because now when you, to give you a practical example, look at certain markets or sales markets that also due to COVID, the accessibility is different. So the consumer behaves different because maybe he doesn't have so much access. Also due to, let's say, of course, weather trends in that region, not just be COVID, but to consider all these factors, that means we have to be more granular in taking up the data. The data, I think now with this digital push, thanks to COVID, it's definitely available. And we need standardized engines to treat this data, to leverage our probabilistic forecasting model, and be, as I said, more granular and more detailed. And like this, we detect more patterns that we can use to improve our forecast accuracy. And I think this is definitely a good point also, where companies who have already our solution available to think about advancing this with now the available data set from big data, and then you reusing it with machine learning.
Well, thank you very much for all these insights, Birger.
Thank you for the interview. Take care.
Take care. Bye.